Om Purnamadaha Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate Om Shanti Shanti Shantihi Yo Antaha Pravishya Mama Vacha Imam Prashuptam Sanjeevayati Akhila Shakti Daraswadam Nanyam Shtahasta Charana Shravanatvagādīn Pranān Namo Bhagavate Purushaya Tubhyam लसतु श्रीमदानन्दतीर्थेन्दुर्नो हृदम्बरे यद्वचश्चन्द्रिका स्वान्तसन्तापं विनिकृन्तति पदवाक्यप्रमाणज्ञान् प्रणम्य शिरसा गुरून् व्याकरिष्ये यथाभूतं विष्णुतत्त्वविनिर्णयम्. So good afternoon, good morning and good evening folks. Thanks for joining part 13 of Ishavasya Upanishad. We've been doing Isha Upanishad for about 4 months now. And it looks like we will complete the Upanishad by the end of the month. So where are we? We are in the third Kanda. Just to remind you, we are in the third Kanda. And we have been looking at this particular verse in great detail. Andantamaha pravishanti ye avidyayam upasate tato bhuya ivate tamo yavu vidyayam rataha. So that particular verse that follows from the previous verse, Sapariyagat, Shukra, Makayam, Avranam, Asnaviram, Shuddham, Apapaviddam, Kavir, Manishihi, Paribuhu, Svayambuhu, Yata, Tatyato, Artan, Vyadadat, Shashvatibhyaha, Samabhyaha. And this particular line, we've kind of discussed this on a few occasions to illustrate how significant this particular verse is, Yata, Tatyato, Artan, Vyadadat, Shashvatibhyaha, Samabhyaha, which actually lays the foundation for the subsequent verses. It really lays the foundation for the subsequent verses in the Ishavasya Upanishad. So before we do that, let's think about the Rishis, Svayambu, Manu, Dadichi, Yagnavalkya, Kanva Rishi and Acharyas, and we thank them for all the knowledge that they've given us. Devata, of course, is the Yagnanamaka Paramatma. And the Chandas here is Anishtub, Trishtub and Jagati Chandas spread across the various mantras in Isha Upanishad, which is also, as you know, is called Mantra Upanishad or Yagniya Mantropanishad or Kanva Upanishad and so on. Okay. So very brief recap. So what we are actually discussing is why is proper upasana of Brahman essential? Yeah. Can we just assume Brahman is whatever we want and get on with our upasanas? No. Vedas do give us a clear instruction and an insight as to who this Brahman is. And it also tells us that this proper upasana of Brahman is essential because it censures those that have a wrong understanding of Brahma Tattva. Because there are consequences for the wrong understanding, and that's what the first verse was talking about, isn't it? Andantamaha pravishanti ye avidyayam upasate tato bhuya ivate tamo yavu vidyayam rataha. Yeah. So the verses for today will be, hopefully all the 5 you will be surprised. They should flow fairly smoothly because it is a unified concept that brings everything together. So what did we do last time? So we understood what is Vidya and what is Avidya. This is fundamental. What is Yathartha Jnana? What is Ayathartha Jnana? What is knowledge and what is ignorance? Some folks think ignorance is bliss. I feel very sorry for those people who think ignorance is bliss. No, knowledge is bliss. Knowledge is the path towards blissfulness, not ignorance. So one meaning of Vidya is knowledge. Avidya means ignorance. Vidya also means you can have all sorts of knowledge, but it is true knowledge. Some people can have false knowledge also. So the Shastras, the Isha Upanishad qualifies this and says Vidya means true knowledge, guys. Whereas Avidya means false knowledge. Then the Isha Upanishad goes a step further and clarifies true knowledge of what? True knowledge of donkeys and monkeys and ice cream and chocolates? No. True knowledge of God. True knowledge of Brahman or Paramatma is Vidya, whereas incorrect knowledge of God is Avidya. Okay. Then it also qualifies, but at the end of the day, we are all in the samsara, right? The samsara is this created universe. So there is something called the material science. That is what we all do in our professional lives. We are all chasing around material science. We make our money and we buy more material science and we think we find happiness here. So that lower knowledge about the material world is actually avidya or aparavidya. Whereas the spiritual science, what is the efficient cause of everything? Material cause, we are all trying to find out. We are good at this these days, I am told. So that is fine. That aparavidya is fine, but it has got a limitation. It can only take us to a certain point. Beyond that, once we start asking the question, why do the material things function this way, but not some other way? Who is it that has made the material world operate in this fashion? So those are all the questions. When you start asking this, that is the efficient cause, nimitta karana. Yeah, material science is called upadana karana, whereas the spiritual science actually is looking for understanding what is the nimitta karana, what is the efficient cause of everything. Okay, so that is the paravidya, which is very beautifully summarized, of course, in the Mundaka Upanishad. Tasmai sahovacha dve vidye veditavye itihasma yat brahma vido vadanti paracha eva aparacha. Tatra apara rigvedo yajurvedaha samavedo atharvavedaha Siksha kalpo vyakaranam niruktam chando jyotishamiti ata para yaya tad aksharam adhigamyate. Okay. So Paravidya is all the Vedas when you approach it through Guru Mukha with Brahma Sutra as a Nirnayaka Shastra and understand the Vedas, then you realize that the whole of the Vedas only talk about this Paramatma. Then they become Paravidya. But if you don't use the rules of interpretation, Tatparya Lingas, Brahma Sutra, and learn the Vedas properly through a Guru Mukha, then what happens is we start building our own interpretations of the Vedas, and then we start saying some majority of the Vedas are useless, only 4 or 5 lines are useful. There are Karma Kanda, Jnana Kanda, and all those confusions happen. Okay, but our rishis are very clear. This is Mundaka verse is extremely clear, where it says, as long as you use the right tools of interpretation, and when you do that, the whole of the Vedas talk only about this Paramatma, so they become Paravidya. But when you don't, it appears they talk about other things, then that is Aparavidya or Alpavidya. So we need to be able to understand and try to make these distinctions as to what is Paravidya and what is Aparavidya, because that is very important for our salvation, says in a Svayambu Manu in Isha Upanishad. So this is a summary slide of what we did last week. So what are the avidya upasakas? What are the avidya upasakas? Followers of ignorance. That is the ones that follow the prayers as described by Yama in Katha Upanishad. Then there are the ones that have blind faith in the God. Okay? And blind followers of dogma. Just because some fellow said this is what it is, then we all go like Ande Naiva Niyama Yata Andaha as described in the Bhagavatam and also in Katha Upanishad. So we are all blind followers of dogmas, and what is happening? We are following into a deep pit. Why? Because we are not making our own individual efforts to have a deeper contemplation of what is it that the Shastras are telling and have the deeper level of experience. So that is also not happening. Yeah. And of course, there are the ones that have that kind of a deeper understanding, but they have just decided that they're not going to share it with anybody else, and they're going to keep all the knowledge to themselves and do not teach or pass this on to others. Okay. And then there are the ones that have knowledge, but do not censure those that have wrong knowledge. They just say, okay, fine, you have your views, I'll have my views. We'll just keep peace and you get on with it and I'll get on with it. Okay, so that is the other group. Then there are the two big ones. There is the one that accepts para and rejects apara, which means the ones that accepts the Brahman, whereas rejects the material world altogether and says that it does not exist, that it is illusory. So that is another category. The ones that accept the para but reject the apara. Then there are the ones that accept the apara but reject the para. That is the charvakas, like many of us, who reject Brahman but just accept this material world is what all that is here. Yeah. So these are all the fellows who Svayambu Manu says these are all the avidya upasakas and they are actually in trouble. that they could actually go to Andhatamas unless they have proper perspective and understanding and experience of true knowledge. So what is the true knowledge? Deep contemplation of truths. Learn and distribute the knowledge. Don't keep the knowledge to ourselves. We should never do that. We should always have that enthusiasm given any opportunity to just share the knowledge. It could be in satsangs, or it could be any social gathering where there are some purposeful discussions about spirituality, not about politics or pensions, but any gatherings that talks about spirituality, we should be able to learn and distribute this knowledge. Then, of course, the Shastras also tell us that the knowledgeables should correct those with ignorance. That is why all the great acharyas actually descend down as avatara purushas and try and give us the knowledge. Srimad Acharya is a classic example of that. He comes down and shares the knowledge because that is a type of, it is a type of spiritual practice. There you have the knowledge, but you also want to distribute to others. And then finally, from our perspective, we should always take Paravidya and Aparavidya as both essential for our spiritual progress. That is a deep understanding of what is material world, and at the same time, a deep understanding of the person who is responsible for the material world. So we do need these both eyes. Unless we have these both eyes, we are not going to be able to reach our destination properly. So that is the overwhelming message of the first verse. Comprehensive true knowledge. Know what is true knowledge. Know why false knowledge is false knowledge. What is Paravidya, what is Aparavidya. And such contemplation is absolutely necessary. Why? Because there are benefits for both. This is the next verse, a new verse for today. Anyad eva ahur avidyaya. Anyad ahur vidyaya. Iti sushruvadhiranam ye naha tad vichachakshire. This is the next verse. So, once you know what is Paravidya and Aparavidya, true knowledge and what is also false knowledge, you need to know this because there are two different types of benefits one can get from having such a comprehensive understanding of knowledge. Okay? And here Svayambu Manu is very interesting. He is saying, the last line I've taken up first for discussion. Iti sushruma dhiranam yenas tad vichachakshire. I've given you the meanings there. Iti, thus. Sushruma, we have heard. Dhiranam, from the wise. Ye, who, us, that explained. So Swayambhu Manu himself is an exalted jiva, right? He is a very exalted jiva in the Vedic pantheon. He is ranked number 10. He is responsible. He looks after the Swayambhu Manvantara. And in the Vedic pantheon, of the ranks of the Vedic pantheons of all the deities, he is ranked 10. And he is telling, I have learned this from the teachers who have taught me that there are two different benefits for somebody who knows what is Paravidya and Aparavidya. Okay, so that is interesting. So I thought here we can open up for a bit of a discussion here. Okay, so I have put the 10th one is in the Vedic pantheon, the rank, the 10th one is Swayambhu Manu. Number 8 is Indra. Number 5 is Garuda Sesha Rudra. They have the 5th rank. Then number 3 is Chaturmukha and Mukhya Pranar Vayu. And of course, the top is Vishnu himself. So I put the question marks here for a short quiz as to what are the fill in the blanks here. So let's start from Vishnu. So you have Vishnu here. Who is the question mark? Who is the number 2 in the Vedic pantheon? Who is that? Who is going to answer this? Let's do a rapid fire.
Mahalakshmi.
Mahalakshmi, thank you, Shilaji and Pratibhaji. Then we move to Chaturmukha, and then you have between Chaturmukha and Garuda Sesha Rudra, there is a question mark. So who comes there? Who is ranked number 4 in Vedic pantheon? Any takers for that?
Saraswati Bharati.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Saraswati and Bharati. Then you have Garuda Sesha Rudra. Then between Garuda Sesha Rudra and Indra, there is number 6 and number 7. So who wants to take number 6 and who wants to remind us who is number 7?
Number 6 is the Shanmahisis.
Okay, very good. Thank you very much. And number 7?
Number 7 will be Parvati. I mean Parvati and Garuda's wife. I forgot her name. Sauparani. Sauparani and Varuni. Varuni, Shesha's wife.
Yeah, fantastic. So the consorts of Garuda Sesha Rudra come under number 7. And then you have Indra at number 8. And then between Indra and Svayambu or Manu, this is a little tricky. Who is in the 9th rank?
Pravahavayu.
Pravahavayu or?
Yeah, Shobhashis Pravahavayu.
Okay, fine.
Yeah,
Okay, thank you very much. So you have the various ranks. So it's interesting, and I think it's important to know. And as I said, I'm never tired of bringing this quiz just for our own revision and understanding, because those rankings are important. This is what's called Devata Taratamya concepts, and understand who is where, and then you can approach these deities in that rank. Because none of these chappies here are going to give us moksha, okay? But they'll lead us towards moksha. But only Narayana alone can give us moksha. We never forget that. Vishnu alone is the giver of moksha. Vishnu, Krishna, or whatever you want to call him. He is the only one that can give us moksha. But all the other devatas will lead us. They are our gurus. And they will lead us towards Paramatma. And that is exactly what Svayambu or Manu is saying here. That I have learned from these gurus. Iti sushruma dhiranam. Look at the word dhiranam. Dhi means jnana. And when you have knowledge, you become brave. When you have ignorance, you fear that something might happen. So it is only the knowledgeables who are brave. And when they are knowledgeable, they have ramana. That means they are happy and they have ananda. Okay. So brave and ananda. So dhiranam literally means that the person who is jnanananda, who is brave, those are all these tattvabhimani devatas who are all aparoksha jnanis, who have actually told me that there are two different benefits of knowing what is para and what is apara. And of course, I've just put a brief discussion here. The primary guru for all of us is Vedavyasa. Okay, let's not forget it. Vedavyasa is our founding father, and he is our primary guru who's taught us everything about Vedas and Puranas and so on. So that Vedavyasa is Vishnu's avatara himself, who comes down to give us knowledge as our guru. And of course, for folks like Chaturmukha Brahma, who is a guru for Chaturmukha Brahma, or who is a guru for Mukhya Prana or Vayu? Narayana himself. Okay? Either in his Mula form or as Hayagriva Namaka Paramatma, where Chaturmukha Brahma gets taught all the Vedas. And of course, this verse in Srimad Bhagavatam is very popular, right? Janmadhyasya yato anvayad idaratashtarteshva vignaha swarat Tene Brahma Hridaya Adi Kavaye Muhyanti Yatsuraya. So that's what the second line says, where Paramatma, he gave knowledge to Chaturmukha Brahma. He is his dear son and student. And with lots of love, Hridaya, he taught the Vedas. Okay, so that is what Svayambu Manu is saying. So here it becomes a Sishya, Guru, Sishya, Parampara. It becomes very important. And this Guru Shishya Parampara, starting from Vishnu Vedavyasa, and it's still flowing in the samsara. We are still having the Guru Shishya Parampara, and that is the only way in which we understand the true meanings of Vedas. And for us, who is the Guru for us? Svayambu Manu, Dadichi, Yagnavalkya, Kanva, Rishi, and all the acharyas. They are our gurus who have told us, Iti Sushrumadhiranam Yenas Tad Vichachakshire. What have they said? Anyad eva ahur vidyaya, anyad ahur avidyaya. So anyat means, let's look at this literal English translations, but then explore it in some detail. Anyat means different. Different what? Different result. Eva, verily, indeed. Ahuhu, they say. Vidyaya, from vidya. Vidya means what? Paravidya. Anyat, different benefit, they say, from avidyaya. Avidyaya means what? Aparavidya. So there are two different benefits. So that is something that we need to understand. So next the question is, okay, it's all well and good, but what are those two different benefits? This is the next word. Vidyam cha avidyam cha yastadveda ubayang saha avidyaya mrityum tirtva vidyaya amrutam ashnute. Okay, so this is the most important reason why we have been struggling for the past 2 to 3 weeks to understand what is this paravidya, what is aparavidya, and true knowledge and wrong knowledge, etc., etc. Because there are two different benefits. What are those different benefits? The first thing is you should you should have a comprehensive view of knowledge. That is, vidyam cha avidyam cha yaha tad veda ubayang saha. That person who knows this both ubaya, veda, what? Vidya and avidya. So that person who knows this comprehensively, and that we have discussed what is vidya and avidya. For him, what happens? Avidyaya mrityum tirtva. Vidyaya amrutam ashnute. So let's look at it in a very in an overall sense. What does it mean? Avidyaya mrityum tirtva. Okay, think about this. Knowing what is false knowledge will lead to eradication of ignorance. Ignorance is the primary cause of samsara. So that leads to the eradication of samsara or suffering. What is this samsara? Death, birth, cycles constantly that we are doing based on our karmas. This is our samsara. And we still have not made that effort to understand why is this happening. That lack of understanding of why this is not happening is ignorance. So once we know that ignorance as to what that ignorance is, then only we will be able to find a solution for it. Unless we know what ignorance is, we will never be able to find a solution for that. So when you understand what that apara, that false knowledge is, then you will be able to find a solution. And when you find the solution, what happens? You get the knowledge. And that knowledge eventually will lead to eradication of samsara. How that process is, we will see during the rest of the class, rest of the session today in various slides as to how that process happens. But this is the primary benefit. If you know what avidya is, mrityum tirtva. What is mrityu? Mrityu means you're losing a gross body again and again, isn't it? So that cycle is mrityu. But there is the basic, most important mrityu that will happen before you liberate. What is that mrityu? Very quick quiz. What is the final mrityu for all of us? Before we cross over to the transempirical plane, what is that mrityu, please?
Linga Deha has to be born.
Fantastic, overwhelming answer from all folks. Thank you very much. So yeah, you shed the Linga Sharira. That is our last mrityu. So that is what Svayambu Manu is talking here. Yeah, and remember, in Yama also has spoken similar verses in Katha Upanishad. Remember, let me just think about this. Yes, Sharirastaya Kalpate. What is that verse? Anybody wants to say that here? Sharisasya Vishramsa Manasya Sharirastasya Dehinaha Dehad Vimucha Manasya Kimmatra Avishishyate Etadvaitat. So that is what Katha also talks about, right? That Mrityu, Linga Sharira and Stula Sharira and so on and so forth. So Mrityu essentially means the loss of your Linga Sharira is the Mrityu. Of course, gross is also there. Yeah. Vidyayam Amrutam Ashnute. Knowing what is true knowledge or knowing what is Paravidya will lead us to the knowledge of God. And that knowledge of God eventually evokes a sense of, awe, a sense of awe and devotion, what we call as bhakti, right? And that eventually, promotes grace. And that grace of the Paramatma eventually will liberate us. And when it liberates us and gives us that liberation, what do we get? We get knowledge. Okay, we get our Swarupa Jnana and we get our Swarupa Ananda. Okay, so that is that when you have the knowledge of Paramatma and with devotion and grace, you will have what is your Swarupa Jnanananda. You have your own experience and you will also experience based on your capacity the Paramatma. Okay, so that is what it is talking about. It is talking about moksha here. It is talking about liberation. That is the benefit of actually understanding avidyayam mrityum tirtva vidyayam amrutam ashnute. Okay. So look at this word, and I was just cross-referencing in other Upanishads, and they come in various Upanishads, Katha Upanishad and Maitrayani Upanishad. Even in Maitrayani Upanishad, this particular section about Sambhuti, Asambhuti, Vidya and Avidya, they appear in Maitrayani Upanishad and they also appear in Katha Upanishad. Okay? So you remember this word, right? You may remember this. Duramete, Viparite, Visuchi, Avidyaya cha Vidyati Nyata. Vidya abhisabsitum nachiketa sammanye natva kama bahavo lolupanta. Vidyam cha avidyam cha yastadveda ubayam saha avidyaya mrutyum tirtva vidyaya amrutam ashnute. Katha Upanishad also talks about the same thing. Maitrayani also gives a reference to Katha Upanishad actually, and it says, see, in Katha Upanishad this has happened. Kurma Purana, of course, gives a full explanation of this verse. So for those of you who want to look at the hardcore evidence, because what we should not be doing in our satsang is concoct our own views. We should never do. Certainly that is not what Acharya did. We should never concoct our own views. What we should do is bring and present the evidence from the scriptures. And all the scriptures that I've cited you so far, they talk about these ideas, about what is the benefit of knowing what is ignorance, or what is the benefit of knowing what is knowledge. Why? Because you are talking about moksha. Why is that important? This is where I wanted to have a bit of an interactive session. The basics revisited, as I've said, moksha, the basics revisited. We did moksha, the concepts of liberation, maybe some three years or so before. So it may be worth thinking about what is this moksha all about? Because that is what our Svayambu or Manu is actually talking here, is what is moksha? Yeah. So here I put a question here. Why do we hanker for pleasure? All of us hanker for pleasure. I certainly don't know anybody who wants to go and harm or hurt himself. There is some form of pleasure that we are all seeking. Why do you want to know and do acts that give us pleasure? Why do we move away from anything that gives us suffering or pain? Why do we do that? We do that in our daily life, right? So this is apara. This is apara vidya there, that you're thinking, what I've told you, there is kind of an apara concept. Why do we hanker for pleasure? Why do we want to know and act and do things that give us pleasure? Why do we move away from anything that gives us suffering and pain? I would really be wonderful to have folks think about this problem and contribute, please. Maybe we'll spend next 30 seconds thinking about why do we do all this? Why do we always seek pleasure?
Because Jiva's nature is bliss. So he wants to be happy all the time. Ananda.
Beautiful, Shilaji. Thank you. Anybody else has another view? Okay, so I think we all unanimously agree with Shilaji that it is the inherent nature of the souls, that it is their nature that they are blissful. So because they are blissful, but they are stuck in the samsara, they are seeking some way of getting that, some taste of that blissfulness. Yeah, that is what they are doing. This is what samsara is. So we are all seeking that because we have an innate sense of blissfulness in us. But you will be surprised that our darshanas, the philosophy, the Vedic, the various strands of darshanas or philosophies that is there in Bharatvarsha, and also the Nastika schools, they all have this. Liberation is a very key concept. Yeah, liberation is a very, very important concept in philosophies, because unless there is a final goal for everything, there is no point in doing something and wasting your 100 years of life doing something when you don't know what is it that you're achieving at the end of it. That achievement is what moksha is. So I'll do a quick run through in various darshanas as to what it means. So let's do Sankhya, Yoga, Nyaya, and Vaiseshika. So I've grouped them together. Okay. So in these schools of philosophy, moksha is complete absence of suffering and complete absence of pleasure. Okay? I will let you make your imagination as to what that state would be. Complete absence of suffering and complete absence of pleasure. And the thinking there from these philosophers is that wherever there is pleasure, there is always a component of suffering. And wherever there is suffering, there is always a component of pleasure that we see in our daily lives. So if such were the situation, then if I say in moksha I am blissful, then there must be a component of suffering also in moksha. So that is not possible. Therefore, we will conclude that in moksha, neither of these things are present. So that is the thinking. I've just given you a summary of the views of Sankhya, Yoga, Nyaya, Vaiseshika. Then, of course, you have the Purva Mimamsakas, the ones that are ritualists who like to throw stuff in fire. Okay? For them, there is no moksha. To be honest, they don't have this concept of moksha, the final liberation. All that they want to do is do various rituals and try and go to Swargaloka, have all those pleasures for an extended period of time, then come down to Mrityu Loka and go through this cycle. This is the Purva Mimamsaka views. There is actually no Paramatma in that equation at all. It's very, very interesting. Purva Mimamsakas. that they just want to be in Mrityu Loka and go to Swarga and back and so on, go round and round in circles. Now, here is the view from Vedanta, and that is interesting in its own right. So, in Vedanta, what do we have? We have Advaita, Visishtadvaita, and Tattvavada. So, there is a dichotomy there. Visishtadvaita and Tattvavada will say, guys, liberation means eradication of suffering and positive experience of bliss and companionship with Brahman. Okay, so this is a very basic understanding of what moksha is in these schools, Dvaita and Visishtadvaita, which is, very sounds very interesting. Eradication of suffering and positive experience of bliss is moksha in companionship with Brahman. So what about our monastic thinkers? How do they view liberation? And here is an interesting idea that many folks probably are not aware, but I'll remind them. Liberation is not something to be attained. Okay? You don't achieve it. We are and we will always be Nirguna Brahman. So this is not something that you achieve. You're always Nirguna Brahman. Okay? That is the idea of Advaita. Okay? That we are always Nirguna Brahman, but through this process of ignorance, we have forgotten that we are Nirguna Brahman, and that is why we are going through samsara. So our sadhana should be, we gain the knowledge and understand we are Nirguna Brahman, and that dawn of knowledge will remove ignorance, and then you will attain your Nirguna Brahmatva. So that is the liberation concept in Advaita. Okay. Then let us look at the Nastika schools, Jainism and Buddhism. Jainism is fascinating. So this is, of course, is a Nastika school. It doesn't take Vedas, it shuns the Vedas, but they have their own extensive literature. So what does Jainism view liberation as? A ceaseless upward flight of the soul in what is called Loka Akasha. Okay, so this is a non-material sky. So when the jivas have eradicated their samsara, then they go in this Loka Akasha. This is this non-material sky, which is an infinite space. There is no limitation to this. And all that the jivas do is they have a ceaseless upward flight with no final destination. There is no Paramatma or God in Jain philosophy. Yeah, so we need to understand this. So there is no God. There is no final destination, but the liberation is the ceaseless upward flight. Because when you're flying, it gives you pleasure. You are happy when you're flying, right? So that is what is the view. Then you have the Buddhist view, which is quite interesting also. There is no God, there is no souls. Okay, but the liberation is the souls, and the liberation is this entity called Maha Shunyatva, Shunyata, okay? The big zero, as it's called, the Maha Shunyata. Entry into Maha Shunyata is the liberated state of Buddhist philosophers. And of course, the academics discuss and debate as to whether there is any difference between Nirguna Brahmatva and Mahashunyata of Buddhism. We will leave this out for our discussion, but I hope this gives you a framework in which to think about this problem of liberation. Prakashji.
Namaskar ji, I have a very quick question. The Abrahamic religions, because they also don't like Buddhism and Jainism, they don't accept the Vedas. Under which category they will come?
Yeah, thank you, Prakashji. So the Abrahamic, I would say the Abrahamic religions would probably fall into this category of eradication of suffering and positive experience of bliss. Because, for example, if we take Catholic philosophy, there will be the evil souls will go into eternal suffering. That is their liberation. Whereas the good souls will go to heaven, where they have a positive experience of bliss. Yeah. So I think the Catholicism and other Abrahamic approaches fall in this group, I think. But of course, there are various differences with regards to Visishtadvaita and Tattvavada and how they think about this. Judaism, I'm not very familiar as to what the Judaic view is. Probably I'll go and do some research myself. But that is my thinking. Unless you have another view or anybody else has another view, please feel free to contribute. But I think the key message is we should keep everything non-controversial and keep it, whatever discussions that we have it in a very dispassionate way. So whoever wants to contribute to that.
Can I say something, Madhusudanji?
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, I think that's a very beautiful holistic approach you've given. But my view has been that, we are trying to look at the same truth through the different windows. So every time we look at from a different window, we get a different perspective. And regarding the pleasure and suffering, what you said, there is an increasing evidence also. I mean, it's also been increased. It's also been accepted in science that you have two types of pleasures. So one is a lower pleasure. So when you have lower pleasure, that is because of activation of the limbic system. You always have a component of suffering. And obviously that originates from hypothalamus and you have release of stress hormones. But when you have an higher pleasure, which originates from the cortical areas, you have secretion of dopamine and all that. Those may not be associated with a component of suffering. So perhaps when we are thinking of liberation, it is the higher pleasures or the joy that we may be thinking of. This is just an idea, what I'm putting forward.
Fantastic, Saratji. I really enjoyed that assessment from a very neurochemistry, neurophysiological aspect. So thank you so much for that contribution. So we plod along. So so having had a diverse view of what liberation is, and what we are having this conversation because of the previous slide. Avidyayam mrityum tirtva vidyayam amrutam ashnute. That is, don't forget that concept. So how do we approach and understand this in a little bit more philosophical perspective? And I always come back to Jayatirtha for this. Iha hi vivida samsarika dukkha darshanena viraktasya shamadamadi mato mumukshoho adhikarinaha tan nivrittayai paramananda avaptyai cha. Look at that. So that is what Jayatirtha says. Why are we, who is a mumukshu? A mumukshu is a person like you and me in the satsang who now knows what is vidya and what is avidya. What is avidya? Vivida samsarika dukkha darshanena. So vivida samsarika dukkha is what we are seeing, right? Darshanena, he who knows this. That is, he who knows what is apara. Yeah, viraktasya, he gets, oh shit, I don't like this anymore. I want to get rid of this. How does he do? What is the process? Shama, dhamadi, mataha, mumukshoho adhikarinaha. And what does he want to do? Tan nivrityayai, tat nivrityayai. Nivritya of what? Nivritya means what? Destruction. Destruction of what? Samsara. And what? Paramananda avaptyai cha. Paramananda, to get that supreme bliss. That is why this whole philosophical process is happening. Sakala jiva jadatmakat prapanchat paramartata eva atyanta binnam nikila gunodaram nirasta samasta dosham parabrahma pratipadayitum sakala shruti smriti nam tad upakarana bhuta cha brahma mimamsayascha pravritir iti tattvam. This is the whole aim of philosophy. If we don't aim for the first two lines, then there is no point in doing philosophy. Okay, so that is what Jayatirtha says, right? And of course, we should always come back and say, what is Svayambu Manu's view? And the Svayambu Manu's view in Isha Upanishad is extremely clear. He said, Avidyaya mrityum tirtva vidyaya amrutam ashnute. Okay. Eradication of suffering and samsara and positive experience of bliss. That is what the Ishavasya Upanishad is telling us about this. So let's look at this in a slightly different angle. So the lower knowledge, so what we have discussed so far fits very beautifully in this slide. So the lower knowledge of the material world, material science, the samsara that we are in is the aparavidya. We are going through this cycle, right? Yeah, this whole process. Where is this samsara happening? This samsara is happening in this Jagat Vriksha, right? This samsara is happening in this Jagat Vriksha that Krishna has said in 15th chapter, first verse. And if anybody wants to recite that, I've not put this here, but anybody wants to go for the 15th chapter, first verse, please. Rapid question. So, Urdhva Manjushila ji, go for it.
ऊर्ध्वमूलम् अधः शाकम् अश्वत्थं प्राहुरव्ययम् छन्दांसि यस्य पर्णानि यस्तं वेद स वेदवित्.
Fantastic. Urdhva Moolam Adaha Shakam Ashwattham. This universe is called Ashwattha. Ashwattha Vriksha. Vriksha. This is like a big world. This world is like a big tree. And for our body, it is called Jagat Vriksha. This world, this is a tree. Yeah, we have done this a million times. Jagat Vriksha. This is where the samsara is happening. And that is what Mundaka Upanishad says that, isn't it? Our birds are back after several months. Dvasuparna sayuja sakaya samana vriksham parishashva jate. Tayor annaya pippalam swadatti anashnan anyaha abhichakashiti. Samane vrikshe purusho nimagnaha anishaya shochati mukhyamanaha. This is our state here. So again, this vriksham, this is where the samsara business is happening in this tree. But there are two fellows there, a Jiva bird and the Brahman bird. Okay, the Jiva fellow thinks these fruits are very beautiful and they're very sweet, and he eats, but he is not finding lasting happiness. Samane vrikshe purusho nimagnaha anishaya shochati mukhyamanaha. This is suffering, and it's in complete delusion because it's not able to find a solution. Okay. So this ignorance here becomes our, what is this primordial? That is what the question, this ignorance that we have here, that is responsible for samsara. Yeah. So our samsara is in this created universe. Yeah. So we should never forget this and start thinking samsara is an illusion. That will be very, very unfortunate for us to think. We have to, this is a created universe. This is where the samsara is happening. And our Svayambu Manu has said this samsara is real made. This world is real. This universe is real. Whether you like it or not, that is what it is. Yata tatyato artan vedadat shashvatibhyaha samabhyaha. It is the same sequence happening again and again. Proper understanding of this universe should lead us to the understanding of its creator as per our capacity. Proper understanding of the creator is absolutely essential for liberation. No ifs, no buts, absolutely essential, because there is this primordial ignorance that is operating in this created universe called as the cosmic ignorance, primordial ignorance that is covering the linga sharira of jivas, that ignorance. So who wants to give us a reminder here? What are the various types of ignorance that we have understood that the jiva has to, has to cope with whilst it's in samsara? So who wants to take that one?
Can I have a go?
Yeah, go for it.
So there is ignorance between the relationship that Jiva has between Paramatma.
Yeah.
There is ignorance of your own self, so of your own Jivatma,
Yeah.
and between the material world, Prakriti, and the Jiva.
Beautiful, Devalji, very, very beautifully explained here. So that, we've done this, right? Jivachadika and Paramachadika. Where Jivachadika is when there, what is the, so here is another quick question, Devalji, just for you to be there. What is that ignorance between the Jiva and the Prakriti?
So they, you are lost in samsara and you feel that it is permanent. And the pleasure that you get is the real pleasure in samsara.
Yeah.
Is my understanding. I might be wrong.
True, Devalji. True, Devalji. Thank you for that. So the reason why that is happening is we have forgotten that we don't own anything in this world. Ishavasyam idang sarvam yatkincha jagatyam jagat tena tyaktena punjitaha magrudaha kasyasvit sanam. The very first words of Ishavasya Upanishad, right? We have forgotten that this world does not belong to us. We don't own anything. We are not independent owners of everything. The primary reason why we are suffering in samsara is we have assumed that we are the owners and enjoyers of everything. That is the primary ignorance between Jiva and Prakriti. And of course, Jiva and Brahman is, again, we have forgotten that there is an independent being inside us as our Antaryami, and he is our controller. And we have forgotten that also. So very beautifully put, Devalji. Thank you very much. So this is our primordial ignorance. And how do we get rid of the ignorance? Mundaka comes to our rescue. Jushtam yada pashyati anyam isham asya mahimanam iti vita shokaha. Only when this jiva bird understands that there is another being inside him as his antaryami. Look at the word, very, very clear. The anyam. Anyam means another one, different. Anya means different. Period. No controversy there. Anyam Isham. Isham is there is another Antaryami who is its controller. Isha means that which controls. Yeah. Anyam Isham. Until it reaches and understands that there is no scope for its liberation. And how does it do that? It gains knowledge about that Paramatma who is there. How does it do that? It does Paravidya. And when it does Paravidya, what does it understand? Yada Pashyaha Pashyate Rukmavaranam Kartaram Isham Purusham Brahmayonim Tada Vidwan Punya Papa Viduya Niranjanaha Paramam Samyam Upeti. So that is the root that Mundaka Upanishad very clearly states for the journey of souls, where you start off with the Paravidya, understand what the Paravidya is, and then start moving towards Jnana, and then understand what the Paravidya is, then you go to salvation. Yeah. So this is where this Paramatma and this created universe become very important. So then you have, so if you look at this, there is this creation on the left side, and then there is this Paramatma on the right side on this slide, right? So what is the proper understanding of Aparavidya? That is the next topic that Svayambu Manu takes in these verses to talk about. Each one is linked to others. It's not out of context, as you know, in our Upanishads. So proper understanding of the creator is very important for liberation in this equation, because this is a created universe where the jivas are going through samsara, and the jivas are also having a creation in the sense they are being given a gross body to go through the samsara cycle. They do various karmas and they go round and round in circles. What we have been doing for, I don't know, eternal cycles. Yeah. So how do we disentangle ourselves from this knot? Proper understanding of the creator is essential for liberation. And that is what the next verse is talking. It's very, very similar verses. That's why we are making very, very good progress today. So the next verse essentially says, Andantamaha pravishanti ye asambhutim upasate. Tato bhuya ivate tamo yavu sambhutyam rataha. Okay, so here, Swayambu Manu, the verses look very, very similar, yeah, but he has just swapped a few words. He has swapped Vidya to Sambhuti and Avidya to Asambhuti. Okay, so we need to understand what is that philosophy. It's very interesting, but very logical. So if you go to Monier's Dictionary of Sanskrit, which is what I did, just went to the Monier's Sanskrit Dictionary, it's available online, just put what is Sambhuti. Okay? It gives you various meanings: origin, suitability, production, manifestation of might, increase, growth, great or superhuman power, fitness, birth. Those are all the various ideas of Sambhuti. Sambhava means somebody's great gunas. Origin, creatorship, creator. So those are all the ideas that should come to us when we think about Sambhuti. Okay. What is Asambhuti in Monier's dictionary? Destruction or non-existence or destroyer. Okay. So that is how you understand this. What is Sambhuti? What is Asambhuti? Sambhuti. So here, let me remind you, we are thinking about what Supreme Paramatma and what is his role in this created universe. What is it that he has done? Okay. And that by that created universe, we are talking about samsara here. Okay. So when you look at that, this is very relevant. As I said, the context, prakarana is very important. So what on earth is going on here? Swayambhu Manu's Manvantara is under trouble. The Asuras have come to destroy this. And he is going to the universe creator, Paramatma, for refuge. So all these things are happening: destruction, creation of the universe, preservation of this Manvantara, all those ideas you will be familiar with. That is coming up here, which is what I want to discuss next. So all that I want you to, the take-home message from this slide is, Sambhuti means creatorship. Asambhuti means destruction. So this is what we have to understand, and I've got a question here. So, Andantamaha pravishanti ye sambhutim upasate tato bhuya yivate tamo yavu sambhutyam rataha. As I said, asambhuti means destruction. Sambhuti means creation. Now we remember from the previous verse, and I keep saying this again and again, Yata tatyato artan vyadadat shashvatibhyaha samabhyaha. So these destructions and creations are happening in eternal cycles, and they've happened this forever and will happen forever in the future. Okay, so that we understand. But now here is the other question. But we need to properly understand who is the creator, Who is the maintainer of this universe? Who is the destroyer of the universe? So that is the first approach to this verse. Actually, we need to understand that properly. And I'm very sad to say, even unfortunately, some of us, we fall at this point. We have said, oh God, G-O-D, generator, operator, destroyer. Generator is Brahma, operator is Vishnu, destroyer is Shiva. Okay, so this is what we have said, and that we have said this is Trinity and so on. What is our view here on this? Is this creatorship, maintainership, and destroyership of the universe is done by one supreme being, or we have got this, well-balanced portfolio for these three individuals? Is it one Brahman who's doing it? Or it is Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva? They have their independent portfolios and they are doing their jobs. What is our view on this one? Just quick contribution, please. Who wants to take this up? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they even in Brahma, Vishnu, and Mahesha, there will be Paramatma who's doing it.
Brilliant. Excellent, Devalji. Anybody has got another view here? Do we agree, disagree?
Everything is under the control of one supreme being, one supreme power. And that's how I would understand.
Yeah. Thank you, Sureshji. Yeah, so...
Madhuji, can I ask just conceptually, what does it matter if there were three creators?
If there are three creators, then, yeah, the interesting question, Devalji. So if you have three creators, there is a problem. Then you have three independent beings, yeah? You have three different fellows who have three independent portfolios and they are not talking to each other, let's say, and they are three independent beings. Okay. So the problem there is nowhere you will have three independent beings. There is always independences. There is always only one should be an independent controller and everybody are subordinates. If you have everybody is independent, like the Sankhya philosophy, Prakriti, Purusha, everybody is independent, then there will be only internal strife. Okay. You need to have one person, a president, and then you have all these prajas. If you make everybody president, they will all be fighting with each other. So that is one view as to why you could argue that could be one view, but you could also argue counter. You could also say that why can't they all be happy with each other and have a very coordinated independentship and run this whole universe? That is also feasible, but where do we go for evidence, Devalji? For all these non-transempirical things, we have to go to only our Vedas and Upanishads to try and find out what is it that the Vedas and Upanishads are saying. So when you take that, the answer is slightly different. Saratji is unmuted. Do you want to contribute or?
Could I say something?
Yeah.
Well, I always like to take a neurobiological view or a neurological view. So if you look at a cell, we similarly have three systems working there. We have a creator, which is a genetic pool. We have a maintenance system, which is a mitochondria. And then we have an apoptosis, which leads to destruction of the cell. Now, when we look at the functioning of a cell, we cannot say that who is superior. Everything has its own role. But in some integrate way, all of this are coordinating very well with each other. So the question of hierarchy doesn't come. Perhaps we, in our limited view, we always think of an hierarchy because we have not known how to exist without an hierarchy. But there may be a different perspective where, all of them could exist in a perfect collaboration. That's my view.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much, Saratji. Yeah. So let's look at, so Prakash, you raised your hands.
Just one. I just want to contribute to this, one few seconds. So basically, when body is formed, it is one egg and that one cell. Rather, I'm not anyway a scientist or a biologist, something like that. But I just want to share. I'll be very quick. So basically, it is one cell, and we call it as stem cells, and that it gets separated into various forms, which is specialized. So taking into that account, I think it's one super entity which can do everything. But we have to understand it originated from the one thing which is capable of doing everything. It's specialized to do certain things. So I'm just giving that parallel. That's all. Okay.
Yeah,
I just want to share that.
Yeah, beautiful. That's it's also an interesting perspective. So let's look at what the Veda says, because our views are helpful for a very interactive discussion. But at the end of the day, the answer lies in our Apaurushaya Veda, right? The authoritative Vedic scriptures. What do they say? So let's look at Is it just one Paramatma as Deval and Suresh Ji that says that it's only one Brahman who is the creator, destroyer, and maintainer? Or there are all these three guys with independent but well-balanced, good understanding portfolio. Let's say it's like a Quad or a United Nations Security Council, but they are operating in peace and they're doing something purposeful. So let's think about that. Or it could be that this Brahman is not just doing three, he may be doing other things also, or he may not be doing anything. So there are so many questions there. And mind you, this is what our Vedic philosophers have asked thousands and thousands of years ago. And here is the answer from Vedavyasa, who then brings out all the evidences from the Upanishads to tell us who is the creator, destroyer, and maintainer, etc. of the universe. So when Vedavyasa said Atato Brahma Jignasa, the second sutra he put was Janmadyasya Yataha. So the definition of Brahman is he who is the creator, etc. of the universe. And in the fourth Adhyaya, fourth Pada, 17th Sutra, he said, Jagat Vyaparavarjam. This whole looking after this universe is falling only under one principle, one independent principle, and nobody else. So this Brahman is Janmadyasya Yataha, and he is Jagat Vyaparavarjam. And what is how does Vedavyasa, come up with these grand views? Lot of Vedas, Upanishads fully, in fact, the primary focus of the Upanishads is to talk about this. Taittiriya Upanishad, Yato va imani bhutani jayante, yena jatani jivanti, yat prayanti, abhisamvishanti, tad vijignyasasva tad brahmeti. So who is that Brahman? That Brahman is that person from whom all this universe has come about. All these universe are destroyed. And all these universe, in between their appearance and destruction, they are surviving. And Abhisamvishanti means moksha, liberation. And he is also the deliverer of all this. So here, in Taittiriya Upanishad, it is not just three. Just destruction, maintenance, and creation, maintenance, and destruction. It actually talks four. Okay. And Shvetashvatara Upanishad talks about samsara, moksha, sthiti, bandha, hetuhu. That being that gives samsara, and that being that also gives us moksha. He is the hetu, he is responsible for us, for our sthiti. Yeah. So here, the concepts of bandha and moksha are introduced here. So the overarching definition of what is that cosmic activity of Brahman is very beautifully brought out in Skanda Purana. Utpatti, Sthiti, Samhara, Niyatir, Jnanam, Avrittihi, Bandha, Mokshadav, Cha Purushad, Yasmat, Sa, Harirekarad. It talks about eightfold cosmic dispensation, the cosmic activities of Brahman. If we say Brahman does nothing, Andhatamas. If we say Brahman does only three things, I don't know where you will go, but it is not a full understanding of Brahman. If you say Brahman does only four, it is incomplete. But according to Skanda Purana, Brahman does 8 things in the cosmic activities of Brahman, which should be known, which is what Sambhuti and Asambhuti includes. The reason why I'm doing this is this all includes in that. So for matter and jivas, what is matter? Matter can have creation, sustenance, dissolution. So pot can be made, pot can be there for a couple of days, and then the pot can be destroyed. And the sthiti of the pot, its reality can be maintained, niyamana. So those are all the 4 things that can happen to a matter. For jiva also, you can have the same thing. Jiva's creation is its gross body. Grita's dissolution is its samhara, is the dissolution of its gross body. And in between, it is going through samsara for 75 to 100 years. And that happens. That situation is called sthiti. And who is ensuring that all these 3 are happening? Somebody is controlling that, right? Definitely you and me, we are not in control. If we think we are in control, then good luck to us, because then we'll be going round and round in samsara. So this creation, sustenance, dissolution, and control applies to both Jada and Jiva. Okay? But then here are certain unique things that Paramatma does for Jiva. What does it do? The Jiva gets obscuration or Ajnana. The Jiva gets enlightenment or Jnana. Jivas are put in samsara called Bandha. And the Jivas are also released into liberation. A pot does not have moksha, right? It's only us who have moksha. Pot does not have Ajnana. Only Jivas have Ajnana. Only sentient beings have ignorance, not a stone. Enlightenment can happen only to a sentient being. At the same time, obscuration can also happen only to a sentient being. So this eightfold cosmic dispensation again is brought about by Skanda Purana. Bandako bhavapashena bhavapashascha mochakaha kaivalyadaha param brahma vishnureva sanatanaha, says the Skanda Purana. Okay. The fellow who has put us in jail and locked us in here and asking us to do the samsara, the same jailer only he only has the key to open that gate and leave us out. And that key, moving him to open that key, is our sadhana, our devotion, our etc. We'll have to move this jailer so that he uses the key and releases the door. That is called the grace in this equation. Yeah. So bandako bhavapashena bhavapashtascha mochakaha kaivalyadaha param brahma vishnureva sanatanaha. Okay. Who wants to do the 15-15? We got another 15 minutes to close this session. Anybody for 15-15?
May I?
Play. Go for it, Pragnesh.
Sarvasya chayam radisannivishto mata smritigyanamahonam cha. Thank you.
Thank you, Pragnesh. So, very clear. Krishna said, I am the one who gives jnanam and I am the one who gives apohanam. Apohanam is ignorance, jnanam is knowledge. Yeah. So, all these evidences clearly tell us, at least from a Shastric perspective, that there is one supreme entity. And again, Shvetashvatar Upanishad, right? Jna agnyau anishav Shara atmakat ishate deva ekaha. Okay, Shvetashvatar Upanishad is categorical. There is only one independent being that controls the sentience and the non-sentience, and that one independent being does eightfold cosmic dispensations. Why am I saying all this? Because that is the approach to this verse. When sad things or suffering happens, we blame it on God. He is giving us suffering, destroys only our comforts, etc. And when good things happen to us, we take credit to ourselves. Okay, so this is what we do. Okay, that is asambhuti upasana of Brahman. Okay, which is censured, which Svayambu Manu says you can't do that, mate. You will be in trouble if you do that. Okay, there are other folks who will say that he gives only sukha. God is so benevolent that he will never give sukha. Okay, think about that Saint Augustine of Hippo, Confessions and all that we did recently. Yeah, that God alone gives, God's role is only to give sukha. He does not give suffering. Suffering is given by Kali, the Asuras. What is this picture here? Anybody knows what this picture that I put? I picked it up from Wikipedia. So what is this picture here? It is not from Vedic philosophy, but it is from an Abrahamic perspective that Prakashji was briefly mentioning. Who is this person who gives ignorance and suffering to souls?
Satan.
Thank you very much. So, in certain philosophies, this also is dichotomized. The Satan is the one that gives ignorance and suffering. And in Vedic philosophy, you could equate Satan to Kali. Kali is an asura. Yeah, you could equate it to them, to Kali and Satan. But the bigger question that Vedic philosophy is asking is, who prompted Satan or Kali to give ignorance and suffering? Okay, so that is another bigger question. He cannot be an independent being. Somebody should be prompting him to do the ignorance and suffering. Yeah, those are all the philosophical questions that you can check out. So even assuming that God only does sukha, but he is not involved in giving or suffering is not right, say Svayambu or Manu, because we have just gone through these evidence here. This important verse, Utpatti Sthiti Samhara Niyatir Jnanam Avrittihi Bandha Moksha Cha Purushar Yasmat Harirekarat. He is the dispenser of everything. He is the controller of everything. Okay. So if we say he has no portfolio, he doesn't give us ignorance, then you are removing that particular, that particular kartrutva from Brahman. Yeah, you can't do that. He does everything. He is a sarva karta, full stop. And he does this. Why does he give you? The sensible question to ask there is, why does he give ignorance to us? Okay, that would be a better question to ask, rather than to say that he does not give suffering and ignorance because he's a very good guy. Yeah, that is what the Vedic philosophers have said. Now, why is it that sambhuti and asambhuti is also important? Very similar verse, so we don't have to spend too much time on this. Anyadahuhu sambhavad, anyadahuhur asambhavad, iti sushrumadhiranam yenastad vichachakshire. There are two benefits of knowing what is sambhuti and what is asambhuti, which is exactly the same as the previous verse, which says there are two different benefits of knowing what is vidya and what is avidya. So vidya is sambhuti, avidya is asambhuti, also another way of looking at it. So what are the different benefits? These are the different benefits. Sambhuti, he is a creator of this universe. If I know he is a creator, if I have the knowledge and the vidya that he is the creator of the universe, Sambhutim Amrutam Ashnute, he is a giver of our Jnanananda in moksha. When I know him as a creator of everything and I do upasana of that, the benefit of that is he will create our Jnanananda. Yeah, create in the sense, what we had not experienced before, he makes our experience happen. So that is a type of creation, if you look at it from that perspective. So he gives our Jnanananda if you understand him as a creator. Why? Know God as Jnananandamaya, that he is a creator. You may remember this verse in Taittiriya Upanishad, Kohe Vanyat Kahapranat Yadesha Anando Nasyat. Yeah. God is Ananda himself, and this creatorship is a manifestation of his supreme blissful state. When we understand Kohe Vanyat Kahapranyat Yadesha Anandaha Nasyat. So if we understand that blissfulness of the Brahman is what brings about this creation, which is a spontaneous act of Brahman, when we understand that, we get our Jnanananda's state. Okay, so those are the subtle philosophies there. Next, what does it say? Sambhutim cha vinasham. So there is the proof as to why asambhuti means vinasha or destruction. Yeah. If you know he is vinasham, he is a destroyer, then what happens? Vinashena mrityum tirtva. So when you know that he is the destroyer of everything, you will also understand he is a destroyer of our ignorance, that he is a destroyer of our samsara. He is a destroyer of our linga sharira. He controls our dukkha and samsara. He is the one who is going to destroy that. Bandako bhavapashena bhavapashascha mochakaha kaivalyadaha param brahma vishnureva sanatana. Remember, Svayambu Manu is praying to Yagnanamaka Paramatma, who is Vishnu there. Yastad Veda Ubayam Saha. Okay, so Ubayam is interesting. You can split it into Yaha Tat Veda Ubayam Saha. He who knows these two things or belongs to Brahman. Veda, no, Ubayam, two, what? Sambhuti and Asambhuti. Or you can split it into Yaha Tat Vedaha Abhayam Saha. So when you know that this Paramatma is Abhayam, fearless, we have done that before, yeah, in Ishavasya Upanishad and Katha Upanishad, where he is celebrated as Abhayam. So when you know him as Abhayam, when is somebody Abhayam? Because when he has Jnanananda, he is Abhayam. Yeah, that is only Paramatma himself. And when you know that he is the controller of not only of us in samsara, but also in moksha sthiti. Purusha Shukta. Purusha eva idang sarvam yadbhutam yacha bhavyam uta amrutatvasya ishanaha. He is also our controller in moksha sthiti. Samsara moksha sthiti bandha hetuhu. So we need to firm this up in our head. That what is Sambhuti Upasana, what is Asambhuti Upasana, what is creatorship, what is destroyership. So one is, of course, the creatorship of the universe and so on. That is Aparavidya. But for Paravidya, what is it that we understand? Creators of everything, but he creates. I need to get my Jnanananda Swarupa. For that, he has to create it. Number one. He has to destroy my Linga Sharira is number two. Okay. This is what Svayambu Manu has said in these verses. Again, I come back to Jayatirtha, who gives a beautiful, beautiful summary of this. Paramatmano Atyanta Binnasya Swataha Chid Anandadi Atmakasyapi Jivasya. Okay. Anadi avidya kama karmadi nimitto ayam paramartata eva anyata karaha dukkhadi anartaha. Na parameshwara prasadat rute apagacchati. Nacha asakshat kruto asau prasidati. Nacha avidita swarupaha shakyate shakshat kartum iti sakala gunakarataya nishesha dosha gandha vidurayata cha tam प्रतिपादयितुम् अशेष आम्नायाः प्रवर्तन्ते तद् उपाकरणभूता च ब्रह्ममीमांसा इति परमार्थः. This is why we should do philosophical discussion, says Jayatirtha. What is that? We are infinitely different from Brahman. Okay? Yes, we have our own, swataha chit ananda. We have that. Okay? Is there for the jiva, but we are not experiencing that now. Why? Because of our anadi avidya. And the anadi avidya has led to our karma and karma. It has led to our karma, which is our desires, our independent desires. And that leads to karma imprints. And this has been going on forever. This is the nimitta. This is why it is happening. Yeah. So, dukkadi anartaha, this dukkadi anartaha can come out only when you have parameshwara prasadataha, only when you have the divine grace. This is going to happen. Otherwise, no solution. Okay. That is why Yagnavalkya said, Atma va are drashtavya, srotavyo, mantavyo, nitidyasitavyaha. Why did he say that? Because this verse is basically, Jayatirtha's verse reminds us again and again that God's grace is absolutely essential for release from knowledge, bondage. Okay, unless we see him, we cannot obtain his grace. Unless we know him, we cannot see him. He is to be known as the abode of infinite auspicious attributes and without any defects, Paravidya. He can be known only through the Vedas, and the Vedas have to be understood through the Brahma Mimamsa or Brahma Sutra. So when you put all this, eventually what will happen? The primary step here, yes, we have to do all this, but one important thing that needs to happen is we need to get his grace to see him first. That is called aparoksha jnana. We need to see him first. And when you see him, he will say, okay, mate, I'm happy with you. I'll destroy all your karmas. And then you finish your prarabdha karma, go to Satyaloka, and then join me at some point in the next kalpa, just before the next kalpa. That is the Vedic view on this. And that is why Yagnavalkya said, you have to see him. Atma va are drashtavyaha. The drashtavyaha that Yagnavalkya is saying to Maitreyi is not just seeing him in a photo album. No, he's talking about your jiva swarupa seeing the antaryami. That is the aparoksha jnana or sakshatkara that is being discussed there. For that, shrotavyo mantavyo nitidyasitavyo Maitreyi. Prashna and Bruhad, same. Sa etasmad jivaganat paratparam purishayam purusham atmanyeva atmanam pashyet. The jiva has to see the antaryaman. That is the primary first step before salvation. And for us to be able to see our antaryaman, we have to do a lot of sadhanas, which has been described so far in these verses. That sadhana is to understand what is paravidya and what is aparavidya. And that is what the next set of verses where Svayambu Manu, with all these contemplations, he is now having a sakshatkara. He is actually requesting, Yagna Namaka, I want to see you. I want to see you. Show me yourself. Okay, I want to see you. So these are some of the most profound verses of Isha Upanishad. And if you think the last 14 mantras that we have done is beautiful, I mean, I can't tell you where I need to start here. When Isha says, Hiranmayena patrena satyasya abhihitam mukham tattvam pushan apavrunu satyadharmaya drishtaye. Yeah. Pushan ekarshe yamasurya prajapatya vyuha rashmin samuha tejaha yette rupam kalyana tamam tatye pashyami. This line is beautiful. Probably we spend an hour talking about it. Yo asa vasau purushaha so ahamasmi. Vayur. Then he goes to this Matarishva that he has celebrated, right? And he talks about them. Vayur, Anilam, Amrutam, Ataidam, Basmantam, Shariram, Om Kratosmara, Krutam Smara. Kratosmara, Krutam Smara. So these are all beautiful verses that is going to come next, where our Svayambu Manu, and we should be aiming like to be Svayambu Manu, right? And we should, when we see our Paramatma, we should, all these verses should come to our mind at that point, that we probably need to recite that. When we have our Aparoksha Jnana, because that is what Svayambu Manu is doing. And over the next 3 weeks, what I hope to do is do justice to these profound 4 mantras that completes the Ishavasya Upanishad. Okay, so we will be closing Ishavasya by the end of the month. So on that note, Krishna Pranamastu, and thank you again for joining us for this session. Any questions? We can take it up now.
Rishi, can I ask a question?
Yeah, they will.
So so we are saying that the Jiva Swabhava's intrinsic nature is to get the Ananda or try to find that Ananda. And that is why we are on a journey. But if your own Jiva Swabhava is full of Andhatamas, then that is not moksha.
Beautiful question,
So-
Devalji. That is a beautiful question, because that is also a moksha. That is also a type of moksha where you have an eternal, it's called the eternal damnations of souls in Catholic philosophy. And in Vedic philosophy, it's called Andantamaha Pravishanti Ye Avidyayam Upasate. Classic example is Duryodhana. Kali, Kalanemi. There are so many of these people who have been described in Vedic scriptures, and these fellows are intrinsically full of tamas, and they will have their moksha. What is their moksha? Not Jnanananda, is Ajnana Dukkha. So they go to these worlds of eternal darkness and suffering. That is their moksha. So you're putting a very, very interesting question, and that is something that not all schools of Vedanta actually view things like that. There are certain schools, of course, they don't even consider heaven and not heaven, moksha and tamas as an entity. There is another one which says everybody is entitled only for moksha. Nobody is entitled for tamas. And there is a third one which says based on your nature, you will either go to moksha, or you will go to Andhatamas, or you will hang around here eternally. So those are all the 3 views. And they all, in one way or the other, they'll fit into all other world religions. And that is why makes Sanatana Dharma such a democratic philosophy where all views are entertained. And we make our own journey.
But
Saraji.
sorry, just to finish this, but there is an implicit dichotomy that the Sat Chit Ananda is superior to going to the Dukkha, Parama Dukkha, whatever you want to call it. That is the bit I'm not
So
understanding.
I think
everybody is going to realize, or is everybody is going to move towards what their intrinsic nature is, then that is what everybody should be left to do.
Yeah. So again, important point. That's why it is sometimes philosophy, as I keep saying, is a bitter pill to swallow. Yeah, philosophy is truth, and it can be, you can quote it and give it in a very nice way so that you enthuse people to come and do satsang, or you can give the philosophy as it is and give them, so guys, this is your bitter pill that is out there. So you work out and find out what is your swabhava. So Devalji, my guru will always say, if you are asking that question, that what is my swabhava? Have I got satyatva in me or not? When you ponder those issues itself, that is a definition that you have sattva in yourself, that you are moving in the right direction. Because 99.99% out there, they don't even talk about these kind of issues. Forget about having deeper discussions. They don't even bring this in their consciousness. So there is a bigger battle to be won here. But the swabhava is there, and that is a particular view in certain schools of Vedanta. We may agree or we may not agree with it, but that view is out there. Sarajji.
First of all, Madhusudanji, thank you for a wonderful exposition. That was really very enlightening. So my question is, according to Upanishads, do they say that you can attain moksha in this life as a human being, or that is something to be attained when you go to other lokas? Yeah. And secondly, if you attain liberation in this human life, is it moksha or is it something else which is less than moksha? So could you kindly let us know what is the point of...
Yeah, thank you, Saraji. It's a huge topic about moksha. So what I can say here is, if there is some guy who is out there, who is charging, let's say, $10,000 and says, I'll do a course for 2 weeks. And at the end of 2 weeks, you will be given certain techniques that you can practice. And at the end of practicing the techniques and you become a master, you will attain salvation. Okay. So there are folks out there who sell philosophy as business and then do it, promising people that they will actually attain their liberation right now. Okay. So the answer to that, Saraji, is there are some exalted souls among us on earth at this point of time who are currently in their very last cycle of birth. There may be some. I don't know who they are at this point. Certainly not the fake gurus of the 21st century. I can write it down and give you, these fellows are not going to go there. But there may be some person somewhere in the Himalayas, somewhere in isolation doing his sadhanas. And that person probably has done so much good things in his previous birth that this last birth is his prarabdha karma. Okay. This is his last birth where he finishes off his prarabdha karma. Such people, when they finish their innings here, the Shastras tell us that they go to Satyaloka and hang out there with Chaturmukha Brahma until the creation comes to an end from so many billion years from now. Okay. So that is what the Vedas say, that those are certain groups of individuals that finish their prarabdha karma. So we have to exhaust our karma. There is no way around it. Unless you exhaust your karma, you cannot come off the cycle of birth and death. You cannot come out of this. So that is one. So to answer to that question is, there may be some exalted souls where they are still finishing their prarabdha karma and this is the last innings. So they may go to moksha. Okay. But for the rest of us who are engaged in karma yoga, we have to work hard towards it and we have to move this Paramatma to grace us. And when he does that, what he will do is he'll remove all that's called karma kshaya, discussed in the 4th Adhyaya of Brahma Sutra. He will do the karma kshaya, destroy all our accumulated karmas. Whereas the karmas that have now started fruition, we have to experience that, finish off that karma and then go to Satyaloka and then follow our journey. That is the grand view of the Vedic philosophy. Whether there is a shortcut or not, I don't know. But this is how I see it. So that is why in Hindu philosophies, that's why we have all got these eternal cycles and billions and millions of births to do our sadhanas. Whereas other philosophies, they say, this is your only chance. There is no creation and destruction cycles. There is only one creation. There is only one destruction. Then you go to heaven or you go to hell. The bigger Vedic philosophy there is, what moved the Brahman to bring forth creation? Why should he bother to create in the first place? Those answers are still out to come. So these are all the issues of philosophy. But I think, yes, there may be some for whom it may be the last innings, but for the rest of the humanity, I think we need to work more. Shobha ji and Srinivasan ji.
And yeah, this is Shobha here.
Yeah.
In Bhagavata, Ajamila, Gajendra, Parikshita, all these they have already done their Charma Deha is over. And in Ramayana also, Rama takes lot of jivas with him when he goes to Vaikunta. So I'm sorry. For everybody, for them it is the last janma, right?
Yeah. Thank you.
Even for people who even from Ramayana, whoever Rama took at the end of the Ramayana, I think.
Yeah. Thank you, Shobha ji. Yeah, very, very well put. And even the Guru will say, for Chaturmukha Brahma, so Sharaji, you will find this interesting. For Chaturmukha Brahma, his prarabdha karma is, he has to look at this, he has to look after this this kalpa for 100 years, which is like billions and billions of years. That is his prarabdha karma, because he's already achieved his aparoksha jnana. He has already seen Paramatma, right? He's already always seeing him. But he has to experiences his prarabdha karma. His prarabdha karma is he has to do this Brahma Kalpa of looking after this universe, and then after that he goes for his moksha. So yeah, Shobha ji, I agree with you completely. Thank you for that. Okay, excellent. If there are no further questions, please could I invite Suresh ji to take us through Om, and then we'll close today's session. Thank you, Sureshji, and thank you everyone for joining again for another interactive session. So look forward to the next 3 weeks. And then in July, we are going to have 18 chapters, part B and C. And then maybe from August, we take up a new Upanishad, and I'll send out a Moodle, I'll send out a poll to just ask for folks as to what they think we should do. Okay. Krishna Pranamastu. Catch up next week. Stay safe. Krishna Pranamastu.
Krishnarpanamastu, Madhvesharpanamastu.